Thank you.
All right, so I'll meeting in order. So I guess we'll start with M2, approval of the meeting minutes for last meeting.
Move to accept.
Second. All right, all in favor? Okay, next, report back on governance committee review of the ordinance. Apologize, I was trying to get there and then all of a sudden.
Do you want to give the summary?
Yeah, I basically gave an overview of the reasoning why we are seeking those changes. I believe that's based on the questions and the reaction, the reception was favorable. Have any results? I guess you would have to speak to that.
No, I'd say that they, what we heard from the city councilors, who make up the governance committee is that they were in favor. And what they were going to do is not take a vote that day, but, you know, put it on the agenda again for the next meeting. But they certainly seemed very supportive of that, so they were just giving a little airplay, shall we say. But yeah, they certainly seemed very favorable to this committee going before the city council with an ordinance amendment to broaden the authority of it.
And I believe it was, what was this council?
Councilor Lombardi.
Council Lombardi, I guess, more or less expressed his appreciation that we would take the initiative to do something like that to begin with.
So when is the next, you said they will sort of bring it up again on the
Yep.
next meeting? Just wondering.
Yep, their next governance committee meeting is. I thought it was the 21st, but it's not. Should be. I will send you an email.
Yeah,
with
doing
me.
it, and I just figured kind of say,
One other subject that I did bring up, I feel I should mention, is that I asked, probably is the inappropriate venue, but I brought it up anyway, and that is, we had discussed maybe surveying the citizen endorsement, and get their feedback on the agenda. So I'd like to move, we have an agenda for this meeting to discuss something that's under.
sure, it's other business, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
think-
discussed the idea of some kind of a survey,
Yeah, I
and
think
they seem supportive of that.
we've definitely done before, yeah, we'll definitely, shortly, but yeah. So, and as far as the next governance committee meeting, at that point, what's the next step is they would vote on it if they're positive for it. Does it happen or does it need to go to the city council?
Then it would go to the city council.
Okay,
So the next governance committee meeting is 10 a.m. on September 21st.
should we be there or?
I think it might be nice if there's a representative of the cable commission, if possible. If not, I'll be.
I could do that as well,
Should be there.
because I literally. Right, so.
I just- And I feel like I should probably just, since I'm the chair, it wouldn't be.
Oh,
bad
absolutely,
to
if you
be
want
there
to, what I'm
too,
offering
but
is
yeah.
the favor to you, and you have to drive it.
No, I mean, I work actually across the street from John Paul Jones' house.
Oh, okay.
Oak Point, so it's the corner of State and
So
Middle.
you were, okay.
So I'm also really close, and that's why I had no excuse for well, not no excuse, to be honest, it was 10 a.m. So not always easy, but I will put it on the calendar this time. Can't promise, but I want, yeah.
I put it on my calendar just in case.
25 and 21st. And I think the 21st, so
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll let the chair of the governance committee know that one or more of the
Sure.
members will be in attendance. Is there any questions that come up?
Anything else with that? On item 4. Draft communications regarding selling coverage.
Yep, so Jason did a, I think, great job with this draft communication. And I think really from my perspective, the only thing that we need to do is maybe look at some dates and times where if we wanna, say, hey, we'd like to invite you to a meeting. Could you let us know whether any of these dates and times work? So I think really that's the only piece that's missing, and then I'll just kind of tidy up the address for Portsmouth City Hall, one which I've been at in case they want to come. Some of them may be familiar with meetings at Public Works, so that's why I'll make sure the address is in here. But yeah,
The thing that's occurred to me since though is, should we take up the issue of soliciting a survey? So we give them more data about this as opposed to just kind of anecdotal. What do you guys think about that?
Come from the population.
Exactly. In other words, would it be more powerful and compel them if we came to this, our survey results indicate that this many respondents.
That is tough.
Yes, and well, because I have to say, to be honest, I guess with our experience with Comcast, a lot of times the bigger they just like they see this as a potential trap.
As opposed to,
Yeah, a true discussion, and you can say, I am naturally KGMP said I'm a bit of a pessimist deep down. And I guess my thought initially is that I'm inclined to think they will maybe not show up just because right now everything's working really well. Why should we, but if we have some numbers, I have to
you
say,
think that makes our argument stronger?
Yes.
I agree. That's what I'm
Okay.
suggesting, is that our argument would be stronger if we had some information that goes along with it.
so I did do an inquiry to find out what it would cost to do like a postcard mailing, because the city did do that previously for another project recently. And the number I was given that it's about $2,400 to do the mailing, but we've done it with the QR code. And so really that's, if this is the avenue you'd like to go, then I'll need to work with the city manager and see if I can find a $2,400 to cover the postage for that, unless we can collectively here brainstorm something other than mailing that we think gets us the same response. I will say we have had good results with those QR codes. What we did when we did the Fleet Street project, or we started to get input on designing, redesigning Fleet Street, we actually put the signage with the QR codes right on Fleet Street so that users, it wasn't just residents, anyone who was using Fleet Street would get that notice. They'd be able to walk by it and they could say, oh, I could do a survey. So even though they weren't residents, they could still report their experience and what they think Fleet Street should be. So a mailing we could do, we'll get it to residents. The question is, if you want a broader pool, you think would be helpful, we could kind of brainstorm here collectively together, knowing that the QR code does seem to be an effective way for people to weigh in, whether we look at other avenues to get information by pushing it out through other medium or going to local businesses and asking them to, post. I know where I go to get my haircut off of Lafayette Road is in La Vida, and no cell phones, virtually no cell phones. I can get my texts, but so I was thinking about this. Do we actually try and get a broader pool by working with some of the local businesses in various areas that
Actually,
post it up?
the businesses might actually be attractive to them as well, because obviously, I don't know if it specifically discourage people from going to them, but it certainly can't hurt. I don't know.
I'm throwing it out there. I think
Yeah,
there
I
are
know.
options, so that's why I figured it was a
Yeah.
discussion point for today. I'm kind of bringing what information I have. We do have our city e-newsletter that goes out. So I'm not saying no to a postcard, but that's gonna hit a very, it'll hit just your residents and not necessarily everyone else.
What is so I was really not even thinking postcard per se, I was thinking, if the city had access to an email distribution list, you said there's an e-newsletter, so obviously there exists an email distribution list. If you sign up.
If you sign,
If you sign up, so the postcard would get beyond that.
right, now we do have a Facebook page, we have, we have other media that we can use to push things out, like parking. We have, our Twitter account for parking, so,
Next door.
yeah, we have next, a lot of people have next
communities are
door.
next door, yeah.
We could post it at the senior center, at
I would
Public
be willing
Works,
to
at City Hall.
Town pavement, distribute stuff, that'd be fine.
Our public information officer, could help us design the target plan. To get this out, she works to get the QR code, she could mock something up for the cable commission to look at and say, hey, does this type of communication capture what you're looking for and help develop the survey? Because that's what she's done for the other projects. So if that works for you, I'll take some notes, I'll work with her, and then we'll meet again, we'll look up look at a survey, where the QR code would take you,
So,
and then get something,
so I'm
like a
thinking,
plan.
if we have different venue, avenues to do that, because the QR code might be limiting to many people, thinking. Older people, think my wife's grandparents, and QR code. So, like you said, several avenues that people could just click on the link.
I'll even walk
So
in neighborhoods
the-
and put flyers and stuff or whatever, in other words, whatever.
Yeah, because I mean, even like the QR code is pretty portable, so we could, could potentially talk with person, help design both some sort of flyer or something like, I don't know where exactly.
We've got the library too, we have a lot of library users. And the library is pretty good about helping us get input in various modalities, and same thing with the senior center. Great staff over there, so they recognize that not everyone's as comfortable with technology. And so they may be willing to help, with paper surveys for people who want to,
Yeah, I would,
fill it out
I
that way.
wouldn't want that, but
I would like
think
to
too,
have both modes, like a paper as well as electronic, I think makes sense.
I know that, there's a lot, for me, I know that my parents, when they were using cell phones, were much more inclined to use the voice rather than, they weren't as comfortable with the texting, and obviously with, less coverage, the voice suffers much faster than the text does, so
Yeah.
that would other be a good point.
Mhm.
So basically, on a paper, an address for the paper to come back. Manually entering the system, the logistic behind it, yeah.
Yeah, it'll just
Would we
take up
be able
some
to-
time to collate, if you will, all the responses but I have a legal department intern. So I might be able to get us some help in that process.
So I assume, if we did the paper version, I assume the city has like a business reply at like account with the postal service or whatever, so people can get surveys back in, or would that even, I guess that would be part of the budget, right?
Yeah, we'd have to figure out how we do that, because normally people are posting stuff to us with a stamp, we don't have like that.
A business reply account with the postal service.
Maybe we've done that with Works projects. I have to check. I don't have the answer to that.
But the idea would be like a trifold with a pre-printed business reply on the back. All they have to do is fill out the survey, fold it, tape it, put it in the box.
That might be, I'll take that note back to Stephanie,
Okay,
who, like I said, she's done a lot of our,
at least for the paper mode.
Yeah.
We'd have like flyers with the QR for the other stuff.
Yeah.
We could distribute either lots of
Yeah.
ways, right? Yes.
and like I said, I think both the senior center recreation folks and the library folks may be willing to just collect them. People want to fill them out
Oh,
right
that's
there,
interesting.
and then just send them over to me internally to collect them.
So the target of this is not only resident, but also workers,
That was my thought. If you get,
because anyone could
if you move
scan
it
it.
beyond the postcard, you can get more information from a
Absolutely.
broader
Like gas stations near the highway, I think would be a great place, so I think we hear a lot from people coming through, how do you find the service while traveling through? here?
Because this spot affects everyone passing through, not just residents.
That's right.
You know.
Say though, the one killer is we're like 2 months too late. Because the tourist season, the tourist season, but it's still not a bad idea.
Well, let me work with Stephanie and see, who's our public information officer, and see if she could help us develop a plan, like, here's how we might approach it with the combination of entry points. Have her mock up a draft survey. If you want to give me some thoughts, I'll pass them on, and then we'll bring a package back to you guys for further input. Is that-
I would move that we put this on hold until we get our.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's a good idea. Now, one thing I'm just, again, sort of looking ahead and not overload us, but what kind of timeframe do you guessing is this gonna take? 'Cause I mean, I don't really know that we've handled, but just looking at the franchise agreement's gonna be coming up soon-ish. So we don't wanna overload ourselves unnecessarily, but at the same time, I'm also not comfortable tabling this for a year. Like, that's not a good idea.
Well, I would like to think that if you give me a couple of weeks to work with Stephanie, that we'll be able to come back with proposed survey and a plan of public input.
So question though about this, if we can move on to talk about the scope of the survey, or we need to add it and move on the agenda.
No, I'll just put,
It's just,
put the
to be
draft
honest,
communication on hold.
I'm a firm believer in Robert's rule or Robert's rule, so like, I feel like this is a framework, I thought that. It's a framework for us to discuss and just to kind of keep on target, but we can definitely certainly.
So in terms of the scope, one of the thoughts I had is maybe this opportunity and expense would be a time to ask about feedback on the cable system, but I don't want to confuse people before too many questions either.
Mm,
So, but it would be an opportunity to gather our own independent feedback about Comcast, and that's specifically, I think, what
Tabor.
Tabor, I think he made a comment to that effect, that in the past they have done that about the cable.
Well, it's joint in a way because Comcast does offer mobile services as well, right? So, so there's the cellular, but also, you know, people might say, oh, I have Comcast, but hey, my cable, they might link it at some level if you have X-Range Mobile. Right, so, but you know, we just have to target the.
Yeah, maybe it's two different target
Yes.
audiences,
Yeah.
perhaps, yeah,
You have to just target the questions and the survey that's specific.
okay.
And without being mean about it,
Yes.
I think there is so much unhappiness with Comcast. That I think we know that, and we.
We wouldn't be that much smarter as a result.
Yeah, as opposed to, I do think that the cellular piece, although we don't have a regulatory leverage, I think getting that data gives us the bigger voice. As you guys.
Especially because we don't have any kind of regulatory power.
Right. So I almost be inclined to say, stick with your current path, which is, let's get something, you know, see how this goes, this will be a nice little test for us with that, getting the cellular information. We've got time. The agreement is not up until,
That's the thing that was, as you come in and out, I'm like, when is it due? Like, it's.
So-
yeah,
So what-
we've got at least a year.
The way I look at it, we can't make any of the cell providers do anything, but what we're trying to bring is awareness.
Yeah, and a discussion to say, and what I'm interested in hearing, why haven't you addressed it? Not in a negative way, but in a
Right.
way that says, well, it's because the city won't let us do this, or
Right.
these neighborhood residents resist the tower, that kind of.
Correct. Yeah, so basically we get the data set based on our survey, this is the result. And we're trying to open a dialogue into what we can do or help you do to address this. Well, we always have to, I always approach things like, how can we?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah, solution.
How can we help you?
You know, it's funny you say that, because I realize one of the questions we should ask on the survey is, would you be opposed to additional cell phone towers in your neighborhood if it made your cellular data better? I think that's an important question to ask, right? Because I think sometimes people who resist the towers aren't necessarily in them majority of respondents that are just the vocal.
And then you have the other spectrum where people have so much vaccine, or they're like, I don't care, put it in the back of my yard,
Right.
you know? So, yeah, that's a good question too, on the survey. You're right.
February 2024, so we have all of next year. So that's. Yeah. They were. All right, so that's good. So should we get give me some brainstorming ideas that I can share with our public information officer and.
As
get
Chris
up this
said,
survey?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Move that we actually have one of us draft the questions and then we have something to discuss because I'm not gonna volunteer, I'm not particularly good at, I tend to put together surveys that lead to where I want them to go. So I'd like it would be nice.
Just maybe just kick a little bit, just because
Yeah.
we kind of keep moving, because otherwise we are gonna have, we do have time.
Yeah, we do.
We're moving through things pretty quickly, so, let's maybe just spend like 10-ish.
yeah.
minutes maybe.
So one of the things I struggle with is how do we gather inputs on where it's gonna be hard to solicit that from people. Where have you noticed their problems? We're gonna get all kinds of descriptions by the oak tree, by the old general store, you know, and that'll be useless or next.
So we put some sort of map in, they put like a little mini map and number the zones, like, again. Postcards only gonna get you so much real estate, but if we could give them an idea as far as zones where they're having something, again, assuming people know. Their geography, but, you know, maybe can we go with a
It's
larger
big stress.
postcard?
Now, see, the thing is, an
Yeah,
example for
stuff
me
out.
is,
That's a good idea.
at my house, coverage is horrible, but also once you go towards Route 1 South, you know, you pass the mobile gas station there, also it's horrible.
Yes.
So I could, you know, report at least 3 times way up. So I guess we gotta be specific in terms of asking people which location.
I think Rob has got onto something. If you could throw a map out that's discernible enough and zone it. Write down the number of zones where you've experienced severe repeated problems with access. I think that'd be useful.
Yeah, at least we pretend to try it, I mean, just sort of throwing stuff out.
That's
As long as,
smart thought.
the problem is that if it's too granular, then people aren't necessarily gonna know, give you the right info, but if it's too broad, we could potentially have a situation, because sometimes, I mean, I'm shooting my own idea down already, but, that's me. But there's gotta be some way, because I also am wondering, like, because if we have specifics, like, I don't know how easy it's gonna be to, even if we were to get exact locations, like, how do we sort of put that into, take that data and put it into something valuable?
I think the zone map would be valuable. I think that you're right, it's gonna be a bit of an art to determine how to zone it, right? In a way that's useful.
Because they're very
It doesn't leave it either.
specific, they're specific though, they're not broad.
Right.
So that gets into here's another option, again, I'm throwing these out.
Yeah.
Brainstorm this. We know, yeah. We know, just anecdotally, you know, where some of the, you know, low coverage zones are. Do we say, you know, we've identified the following areas. Check the box, I'm thinking, does that make, have you been in these areas and noticed? And they can just check the box, and then if they wanna add any other area, please describe. You know, like at your home, give address, or at your place of work, give address. Something that makes it easy for them to say, yeah, I've noticed by the hospital or on Lafayette South in the area of Walmart and La Vida or whatever, some like clear.
You make a good point,
Pieces.
Suzanne. I'm not sure people process maps the way us engineering types much or appreciate them for that matter.
Right, so I see 2 things. The areas that are completely dark, but then there's area of bandwidth problem. That's like 2 things, right? So one, we're like dead zone, second is like peak times, basically nothing. That sometimes you have 5 bars, but just right, no. That's two things, yeah.
Right.
You know there are two things, I'm not sure how.
I know, that's what I'm thinking too, because if people are, you know,
What you could do is structure surveys such that you basically have two columns of answers next to the same questions, right? So, for example, use your thing where you describe those things, you describe those zones. Column one is no signal, column two, I have signal, but the data is slow, and say just like that.
Yes.
Yes.
I have signal, but the data is slow.
Yeah,
And then all your questions, you ask both, you know what I mean? And so
Right.
even if the geography were, and I really like Suzanne's I like the idea of describe areas in
Right.
common language, this is
Right.
where
Call.
having help,
give address, work, give address.
right? But I mean, this is where having the help of your survey person would be able to maybe describe these areas that
Yep.
people would understand.
how many responses have we gotten in the past too? Because you know, if we have to process a couple hundred, it's not that bad, but if we were to receive like 1,500. That would be definitely like, obviously, putting those data points on a map is gonna be more difficult, but. If we can have like, I guess I'm also thinking like, we can have clusters, where we got the clusters showing up like, boom, there, okay, we got a cluster 50 in this general area. Okay, maybe they're a little off on location,
Because we'll have the
but,
chances at some point.
right,
Well, this is, I think where she was heading with this was. Let's us three, or maybe a little extended group, go find where we suspect the problems are.
yeah,
And list those ahead of
you're
time.
right,
Yeah.
and I think that's a good idea.
And then use somebody else to describe those places. So I might say the hospital, but somebody else knows that is this. In other words, get somebody else's input, how to describe those locations, give them a list, no more than, what's the 5 to 7 rule?
Yeah.
You know, 5 to 7 items, give them 5 to 7 locations to pick from. And I think that gets us there, because the more I think about it, thinking about my own kids who aren't dummies, but my daughter especially does not get maps. Map is not a thing that resonates for her at all.
And not only that, but what's the ultimate of, you know, taking a step back, what's the ultimate objective? We're not necessarily going to get answers on all this is really to get them.
Yeah.
Exactly. In other words, there's
Yeah.
a problem, guys. See,
Right,
out of this many surveys sent, we had X% respond. So that means there's interest, period. Right? You know, just the response rate is going to indicate interest. And then if you can get to what you guys are saying, based on these answers, congregates around here.
And then at least gives us numbers, gives you leverage.
Right.
You know, they might not do anything about it, but at least the population would see, oh, we're addressing it, and then
Right.
they might pressure. Join and pressure the companies, hey, so why aren't you doing this as well?
Right.
So, the masses.
we're just bad friends.
I think the other thing I would, when we get to that point with that data, the more I reread my draft, we want to lead with the sentences that talk about helping them first.
Right.
Right, not about we have a problem. Let's not start there. Start with. We want to hear about your problems, provide the data. What are your problems? And here's some supporting information you've got.
Because things like that, companies will never ask, because they know there's a problem.
Right.
Mhm.
But we kind of, we push them to like go in there and say, oh, okay, we acknowledge it, so, but yeah, this is the data, let's see what we can do.
So it seems like we have I'm sorry.
And I think we wanna know who's your provider. Right.
Yes, absolutely, because I have to say, like, I know you've got Verizon, right?
AT&T.
Are you at AT&T as well? Because I honestly have not really had big problems, but I also don't know that I can say. No, I'm so
Who do you
busy. I'm sorry,
Who do you have for a provider?
AT&T as well, but I'm also kind of thinking like, all right, well, how much are you actually using it? When you're at home, you're actually I'm actually on
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
See, I walk a ton, and so I'll even walk to the hospital for my appointments, and there's just a huge dead spot south of whatever it is, where you call it is.
Yep.
Yep.
There's no service.
I mean, even a bad.
Well, not only that, but that may also be worked on very shortly, because you now have West End Yards there, you have so many people that all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They may be just behind the curve, or maybe they haven't been able to
I
get.
don't know, but it seems amazing to me around the hospital, which, by the way, when you're at the hospital grounds, you can hear the cars on 95. How is it possible you can have a dead spot? I mean, there's an interstate highway, it's so close by.
So also hospitals have high powered RF for their communications, that sometimes
Maybe that interferes.
I don't know, but it's like, I mean, it all depends on I honestly don't know what their frequencies are, or what frequency bands they have.
because when I was inside the hospital, I could get like 2 bars, but in the parking lot, it was just 0.
Yeah.
Which is not even Wi-Fi, so. My take is we have the dead spot,
Maybe the hospital's providing some sort of inside support and they've got a microphone inside of them.
I suppose we're not gonna get spoiled hatters come out of the network, going, it's a government conspiracy actually to suppress cellular signals in certain areas of town. So,
Let me see too, I meant to do this before when we started this conversation, but let me shoot an inquiry over to both police and fire. Because I know they're aware of these locations and obviously they use cellular service. And I know it's been a talking point, and I meant to do that earlier when we started this conversation, and I'm sitting here now thinking, yeah, I meant to do that, but I haven't done that, so I'll put that on my list.
say you use AT&T, once I pass the new fire station cross service, big building there,
Mhm.
pretty dead. So if the 5 people use AT&T, they'll probably have very bad signal.
Yeah, I will say this, we were having challenges at community campus with mobile service there because a number of nonprofits use, mobile service and really rely on that. We were able to work with, I think it was Verizon, to install some boosters so that they get better service. And that, again, that goes to the identify the problem, make some phone calls, make some more phone calls, invite people in to put in infrastructure. And it was that conversation
Right.
piece.
So then we go to the boosters signal, but not your bandwidth, right? Because you get capped to the pipe.
Right, exactly.
So you're getting 5 bars signal, but your pipe is still capped. So yeah, I mean, all of these are good,
Yeah.
good questions.
It seems like we got like a tentative format, so at least for locations, we identify the spots ahead of time. The list of questions, but for each question we ask, the difference between signal and speed.
Right. Thank you, really.
Yep.
Now, one other thing, I'm just looking at the time, just so we can kind of keep moving on this too, especially since I don't know how much we've got in closed.
You don't have a lot of closed session because there's a lot that is outstanding and not. I don't have answers to from the last meeting, so I was gonna let you know that you have the time that you need, because I don't have. Those
Actually,
follow
I'd like
items.
to ask if we could close
Yep.
5 minutes early for myself personally.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll do evens with-
Okay.
One of the also thing I was sort of thinking, like, I know that, just because I read PC Mag, they had recently done a survey where they basically drove around the country with multiple different phones, and they evaluated in certain areas. Now, admittedly, I don't think that Portsmouth ranks just because they're doing like larger cities, Atlanta and Dallas, et cetera, et cetera. So, and in fact, I think Boston is probably the biggest city, the only city we want to study. But I'm wondering if, especially since the city is using these systems, is there any way that we can piggyback on somebody else to have studied it?
Huh.
Where, basically like, again, I don't know if it's necessarily a study or if it could be something as simple like when they did the study, they were basically driving around with 3 phones. So Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon, and they had phones and they would just then at that point evaluate signal strength. And they actually even went so far as they had maps where like, okay, they had sample points along where like it was just simply red, green, yellow. So at that point, you had a general idea, but because they had so many sample points, again, you could see the clustering of like, okay, these are bad, these aren't great sections, that these might be areas. I don't know, could they be a science fair project or something like that? Where like,
That's what I was just thinking, I was trying to think of,
Didn't somebody here mention EMS or the fire police went to some alternate provider for this very reason, because they couldn't rely on Steiner?
we were certainly looking at it, and I don't know whether they moved to AT&T, but we were struggling with Verizon.
So the question is, when they were going through that process, did somebody do that already?
That's
Right.
why
Oh, gotcha.
I was like, I meant to ask them when we started to have this conversation. And
So I'm
not.
slow on the uptake, that's what you meant.
yeah,
admittedly, it's definitely that's a huge undertaking. I'm sure that if we were to have to hire somebody to do that, that would make the mailer. But pale to the cost of it, so it's bad.
If you-
But if I'm thinking if it's something that's valuable to this fire, it may not be as big of an issue. Whereas,
There are teams of engineering out there consultant that do that. They have their car, they equip, they would drive around Portsmouth and give you data points.
right, but I'm thinking that would be super, I would think would probably be super expensive.
To do our own fact finding field trip. You guys have AT&T, I have Verizon, right? You just need somebody who's the.
Or we could just, yeah,
We just see a network analyzer attached to your car and go around and just test the signal. Right, we did that a couple of times. So
I love the science project though. So my little brain is churning here.
Are there community car tech schools in Portsmouth?
well, there's sort of
The
like,
high school has some tech programs, and then there's the community college at Great Bay. We use UNH students in the public works department to do like water quality sampling and that kind of stuff, so public works actually use a fair amount of interns. Department right now has an intern from UNH. So that's why I was trying to think what contact I might have in particular departments that might be an easy
what about
ask.
Nick? Nick, is it Nick?
Oh, great. Can ask Nick
He used to be with the cable commission, but
at Twins.
yeah.
So that will keep.
But he's a professor or was professor at UNH and specialized in wireless coverage and sort of wireless.
So let me throw out this idea as we think about gathering data. Our mission is to provide access to the citizens of Portsmouth, right? Whether or not the vehicle says good signal, it really doesn't matter. What really matters is what's the experience of the people who use it.
Right.
So I think really honestly, come back to the survey, it's going to be the most valuable piece of data we're going to gather because it says, are the citizens getting what they want? Yes or no? It's that simple. Whereas if we can go out and build maps all day long, if we say, hey, AT&T, look, you got a huge dead spot here, the
Yeah,
answer could be, so.
Yeah.
Does anyone care?
Right.
Who cares? So the care question, I think, is probably the most important thing.
So maybe one or more of you will kind of think of the areas of town where you have identified it. I have my list, the end of the runway.
Airfield is bad too.
And we put our list together and I'll work with Stephanie and let's see if we come up with something.
Okay.
And I'll also, in the meantime, I'll also check with police and fire and see what they have for data. With Alan Brady, our technical director. Because he's been, like I said, I know he works with, I think it was Verizon at the community campus recently because they needed more than what they had out there. Sugar tree, so.
Good for now. So I guess, yeah, so what we'll do is we'll have some days come back and.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should find another meeting date.
Right,
Also like some ideas for questions, survey questions.
format.
So is there anything else we would want to know? I have no signal or data is slow. Identify some locations that's easy for them to check the box or write in their home address or their workplace or just another, if they want to say, yeah, when I go to get my haircut, I'm like, yeah, it's the address. Who's your provider? I mean, do we really need much more than that?
I think, what are you doing?
Okay.
In other words,
Okay,
like, people use the GPS thing, right? They're maybe like, that's where it trips me up a lot.
Versus streaming video. Like if
Right.
somebody is like using their cell and they don't have Wi-Fi or they're just using the cell. Their bandwidth requirements are obviously gonna be a lot higher than.
Here's what drives me crazy, and this is a real first world problem, but I'll be out at the driving range or I'll be on my way back and stop at Market Basket in Portsmouth. And then I'll wanna look, is the dry cleaners open? And then I don't have data,
Yes.
Yes,
right?
yes,
I can't see if the dry cleaners,
yes.
I have to resort to a phone call.
I think that's
Somebody
something
has
that
to
we
be
do.
somebody answering the phone now, that actually is valid.
I did that, I was trying to see if the GNC was open there,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden it's just like,
the data stops,
Yeah.
right, something happens.
Yep.
Right,
That has been my
Absolutely.
experience as well. Okay, so maybe we give some, I think it would be helpful if we give some people some examples. For example, are you using GPS? Are you
or maybe we go ahead and list those too.
restaurants? Are you trying to check your email? Like some very basic ones.
you
that
should,
people do.
what's your typical use of cellular data?
Right, and the other thing I think we need to add
Well,
on is,
I think I kind of like giving them a few choices, just because otherwise we're gonna get a litany that we're gonna have to sort through, whereas if we have.
let's give
Again,
it
5 to
lists,
7.
just like
Yeah.
you said on location.
Yeah, give them,
GPS.
and even if it gives them another,
video.
Another,
I think the other question we should ask is, do you have a landline? This comes back to
oh,
public safety.
yes,
Public safety, if they don't have a landline and they got poor signal, like one of the questions would be, where do you live? So tell us where you live, give us your, if they're willing to give us the address, that'll give us a pinpoint. Do you have good cellular service where you live? Do you have a landline? Yes, or no. And I won't say we draw the conclusion, but you can infer from that that there's a slight public safety issue here. People contact 911 via this, and we have dead spots, that's not good. And it's exacerbated by the lack of a landline. I would say, you could draw that set of conclusions.
Well, that's valid, because more and more people use cell phone.
yeah, I got around one.
I have a,
Yeah, I don't have one.
I suppose that you have a number, but I don't know if it's triple play, but
that's true. I think I do too, but.
So is there any other business? We'll move on to any other
Monday.
business?
Go to the business side.
No other.
That was the other business. On public comment?
I only put that on there because I realized we should generally allow public comment if
Okay,
had anyone from the public show up.
and then one participant address.
Yep.
Fine. Excellent, party one. Okay,
there was really a new person, right?
Yes, who hopefully will be appointed at the next meeting on September 19th.
cool, cool.
Was right.
All right, we good. So. do we-
Next meeting.
Why do we, so we have anything for close?
I got nothing new. Because I don't have answers yet from the items that we identified last time.
All right.
So
As far as data, previous data that we've been provided in the past. To,
we had the follow-up questions, which I don't have. answers.
I was thinking more like data points for, where Richard had put together previous
Right.
graphs over time. I
Oh,
don't
I
have
owed
any
you.
of that.
Oh, I owed you.
Again.
I have a question though, does it make sense to ask for a meeting with this fellow, just to say, just get a preview, what are you thinking about, what's in your mind, as we think about the next?
You did that? You did invite the representative? Okay.
Just for a very friendly chat.
Sure, Jay?
Yep.
See if he comes.
I assume it'd be okay if he came via Zoom, right?
Good. Oh, you might just come in person.
Oh,
Thank you. And also, this other member, I guess he'll hopefully be approved for next meeting, so. I'm gonna say, if for some reason it gets hung up, we probably ought to invite him to attend as a,
Yep.
as a non-member, just so that we can kind of get him up to speed. As well as an,
I forgot to let him know about this.
Well, so did I, so. Cause I forgot to tell my administrative staff. I'm on the list, so. So, yeah, so assuming, the new person is added on the 19th. We could look at the back end of that week or the following week. That'll also give me a couple of weeks to work with Stephanie on what we just talked about.
I'd like to propose the first week in October, if that's possible. Okay, it's on my calendar, it's clear as right now.
That works actually really well for me. Yom Kippur is the 5th, so we might want to stay with that date.
I could do the 12th as well.
12, I can do the film.
12th works.
All right.
12th? Good. At 4 o'clock? Is that working? Okay. All right, so I will, that's good, because that may give enough time for the Comcast rep to get on his calendar too, or people can, you know, tick off a bunch of things, cellular piece, Comcast piece, we should have answers by then. Those outstanding questions, so.
It'll just put Jay, if we
I'll let you know.
yeah, I'd say put them up to the top. So,
If there's any problem with that date, I'll let you
would you, Jim?
Second.
Good, all right,
know. Good. You're at 5 minutes.
Thank you
in.
for this.
Good,